The 2-year-old kid kept pointing at his dad's closed casket, and what happened next left everyone in shock. "Hi there. Sit back and relax while you take in this unusual moment at St. David's Church." The church was draped in sorrow, its bells tolling slowly, merging with the quiet weeping of the mourners to create an atmosphere of deep grief. Megan stood silently next to her husband's casket, holding little Bella close as the toddler struggled against her hold, his small face red from crying. Bella wouldn't settle down, her innocent eyes fixed on the wooden casket where Ethan lay, unmoving. "Daddy, Daddy," she whimpered, her tiny fingers shaking as they pointed at the casket. Megan's throat tightened as she gripped her dark scarf. She longed to cry but found herself choked by sorrow. Ethan's sudden passing still felt unreal. Just yesterday, he had kissed her goodbye, and now only a cold, lifeless body remained. Outside, people from the neighborhood had gathered, murmuring among themselves. No one could understand how a robust man like Ethan could have died so unexpectedly. Some speculated it was a tragic accident, while others whispered that fate had its own plan. Mrs. Hudson, an elderly woman from nearby, moved closer with sympathetic eyes and placed a gentle hand on Megan's shoulder. "I know you're hurting, dear, but is Bella really all right?" she asked softly. Megan looked at her daughter and noticed Bella trembling, her wide eyes fixed on a shadowy corner behind the casket. Suddenly, the little one let out a sharp cry. "Daddy, he's trapped. He's asking for help." Inside the church, the air grew heavy with unease. A hush fell over the crowd as nervous looks were exchanged, and some people quickly crossed themselves. Mrs. Hudson stepped back, covering her mouth in shock. "Goodness, she can see something," she whispered, her voice trembling. A chill raced down Megan's spine as she turned to Bella, trying to keep her voice calm. "Bella, what did you say?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Daddy's still there. He's calling for Mommy." "He's stuck," Bella insisted, still pointing at the dark corner. A cold gust swept through the church, making the altar candles flicker, and although no one spoke, Megan could feel the tension building. Just then, the church doors creaked open with an eerie sound, and a tall man entered. His stern expression revealed him to be Derek, Ethan's cousin, dressed in a sleek black suit. His dark eyes scanned the crowd before resting on Megan, and he offered a smile that felt strangely off. "You must be exhausted," he said in a deep, measured tone. "We're all devastated by Ethan's loss." Megan managed only a slight nod, too overwhelmed to speak. Derek's gaze then shifted to Bella, who was still clutching her mother's dress and staring fixedly at the shadowy corner. "She's too young to grasp what's happening," he remarked. "It's best not to let her say things that might scare everyone." His words carried an unexpected edge, and Megan frowned, unsettled. "I'm just grieving for my husband," she replied, doing her best to remain composed. Derek's expression changed quickly. "I hate to bring this up now, but you know Ethan left behind a mountain of debt. It might be wise to sell your home to clear his bills," he suggested. Megan froze, a wave of dizziness washing over her. "Sell the house. What are you talking about?" she demanded. Derek sighed, his concern barely masking his true intent. "Ethan was a good man, but he had his problems. I'm only thinking of what's best for you and Bella." A deep dread settled in Megan's bones. She had never trusted Derek, and now, before Ethan was even laid to rest, he was already talking money. At that moment, Bella clung even tighter to Megan's hand, her eyes glistening with tears as she pointed once more at the casket. In a small but clear voice, she repeated, "Daddy's stuck." Derek's head whipped around, his face momentarily frozen in shock. The tension in the church grew thicker as people began to back away, unwilling to draw near. Megan knelt down, her heart pounding, and asked, "Bella, what did you just say?" Bella looked up at her with a scared expression. "Daddy hasn't gone. He's still here calling for Mommy," she whispered. A suffocating silence fell over the room. Nearby, a woman named Joan tugged on another's sleeve and murmured, "This isn't a good sign. A child this innocent wouldn't lie." Megan squeezed Bella's tiny hand, trying hard not to tremble, while Derek's jaw tightened as he tried to brush off the incident with a nervous chuckle. though Megan noticed his hands clenching into fists. None of them knew what was happening, but one thing was clear. Something was seriously off. As darkness seemed to seep into St. David's Church, the flickering altar candles made the air feel even heavier after Bella's words. Those around the casket began to step back, avoiding Megan and Bella as if they were cursed. The echo of Bella's cry, "Daddy's still here," calling for Mommy, reverberated in Megan's mind, sending shivers down her spine. She scanned the room and found Derek, the man who had pressed her to sell the house, standing uncomfortably with his fingers drumming on a wooden bench. "Come on now, let's not let a little child's words stir up needless fear," he said, forcing another weak smile, though his voice betrayed a slight tremor. Mrs. Hudson, the oldest in the village, silently made the sign of the cross and murmured, "There are forces beyond our understanding. Sometimes children see what adults miss." A shiver ran down Megan's spine as she gripped Bella tighter. Derek blinked rapidly, then tried to steer the conversation back. "I'm only trying to help. We should sort out the house and your other assets before it's too late. If Ethan were here, he'd want you to handle things quickly." Megan's stomach churned. "Could you leave me alone for a moment?" she snapped, her voice steely. Derek shrugged, but irritation flashed across his face. "I'm just offering advice, but if you're too stubborn, I may have to get the authorities involved," he warned, his tone icy. Joan, a villager, muttered to someone nearby, "How heartless. The man isn't even buried yet, and he's already discussing assets." Derek ignored the murmurs. "I'll be back tomorrow. By then, I hope you'll have made up your mind," he said, turning and walking out. Megan's heart pounded, not just from his threat, but also from the way he reacted when Bella mentioned her father. Why had he looked so tense? She glanced down at Bella, who still clung to her dress. "Mommy, Daddy's still here." Megan took a deep breath, fighting off panic, and asked, "Bella, what do you mean by Daddy's stuck?" Bella looked up with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "Daddy is trapped in there, calling for me. He's scared." Those words sent a chill through Megan as she returned her gaze to the solid oak casket, its lid tightly shut, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Standing nearby, Mrs. Hudson shook her head. "The child isn't making it up. I've seen this before." Megan turned to her, her pulse racing. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Hudson paused before speaking in a hushed tone. "Years ago, there was a case where a man was believed dead, but he had only slipped into a deep coma after he was buried. His family was haunted by nightmares about him." Her voice trailed off, haunted by the memory. Megan's throat went dry as she looked back at the casket, a rising horror creeping over her. Bella hiccuped and whispered, "Daddy is calling me." In that moment, Megan's chest tightened, and a shiver ran down her spine. No, it couldn't be. Ethan was dead, wasn't he? Yet, she wasn't completely sure. Outside, the wind howled through the stained glass windows, producing an eerie sound, and one of the altar candles flickered out. A few villagers exchanged worried glances, murmuring that this was a bad omen, as if a storm was approaching. Megan scanned the room, feeling the walls closing in on her. "What should I do?" she wondered, trying to convince herself it was just a coincidence. But what about Ethan? Clutching Bella close, her heart beating like a drum, Megan heard Joan whisper, "If you have even a sliver of doubt, don't let them bury Ethan just yet." Those words struck her like a knife. She no longer knew what to believe, but one fact was undeniable. Something was very wrong. As the funeral dragged on, the whispers grew louder, and the villagers began to back away from the casket as if it were cursed. Megan stood there, frozen, her mind in turmoil, while Bella continued to cling to her, eyes filled with terror. "If you have even a hint of doubt, don't let them bury Ethan." Joan's words echoed in Megan's head. Although she wanted to dismiss it as a child's overactive imagination, deep inside, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was amiss. Derek had left, but his reaction to Bella's mention of her father had made Megan even more uneasy. Suddenly, from outside the church, a voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Megan!" It was Liam, a close friend of Ethan's, arriving at the entrance, panting and clearly in a rush. "I just got here, but there's something you need to know." Megan's heart raced as she asked, "What could be so important?" Liam stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Before Ethan died, he told me something about Derek. A few days before his accident, Ethan said that Derek was pressuring him to sell the house. And when Ethan refused, the very next day, he had his accident." A cold wave of dread washed over Megan as she recalled Derek's earlier insistence on selling the house and his unnerving calm when Bella spoke of her father being trapped. Could it be that Ethan's accident wasn't an accident at all? Megan's hands trembled. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Liam swallowed hard. "I can't prove it, but Ethan never trusted Derek. He warned me that if anything happened to him, you shouldn't trust anyone." Megan felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. It couldn't be true, but the pieces were starting to fit together in a terrifying way. Just then, Bella tugged at Megan's sleeve, her eyes wide with fear. "Mommy, Daddy is crying." The entire church fell silent. Mrs. Hudson stepped back as others in the crowd exchanged looks of growing dread. "The child really can see him," someone murmured. Megan swallowed hard and turned to Bella. "Bella, what did you say?" Bella pointed to the casket, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy is crying. Daddy is crying inside." The atmosphere in the room became oppressively heavy. Megan felt as if the blood in her veins had frozen. No, it couldn't be. But then a faint thudding sound emerged from a casket. No one spoke. No one dared to move. Was it just an illusion? The sound came again, thud, thud. And this time, it wasn't only Megan who heard it. The crowd began to stir. Mrs. Hudson trembled, repeatedly making the sign of the cross. "Oh my God," she whispered. Joan stammered, "We should open the casket." Megan's breath caught, but before she could move, a voice thundered, "No one is to touch it." Everyone turned as Derek had returned, standing at the church entrance, his eyes blazing with anger. "Don't let superstitions cause chaos. This is absurd," he shouted. Yet Megan couldn't shake the dread swirling inside her. Looking around, she saw trembling faces, people caught between fear and doubt. Another thud sounded, and Megan's face turned pale as Derek clenched his fists, his voice a dangerous whisper. "No one is opening that casket." His words only deepened Megan's certainty that he was hiding something. The church fell silent, the atmosphere thick with terror as the rhythmic knocking from the casket left everyone frozen. The flickering candles cast eerie, quivering shadows on the stone walls. Megan's heart nearly stopped as she stared at the oak casket, the very spot where Bella had just claimed to hear her father crying. "No one is opening that casket," Derek repeated in a sharp, frantic tone. A few tried to reassure everyone, insisting it was just the wind or that the wood was contracting from the cold. But no one was convinced. Mrs. Hudson murmured, "Wood contracting can cause knocking sounds." Her eyes were filled with dread as George, a longtime friend of Ethan's, stood up, his voice steady and unwavering. "Derek, why are you so scared to open the casket? If you have nothing to hide, let's check it out." "I'm not afraid of anything," he declared. Derek nearly shouted back, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists, while Liam stepped forward, his eyes sharp. "Let's open it and see for ourselves," he insisted. Suddenly, the casket thumped again, and several women shrieked, clinging to one another, as the somber funeral transformed into a living nightmare. Bella clutched her mother's dress, tears welling in her eyes. "Mommy, Daddy's calling you," she sobbed. Megan, though trembling, felt a burning resolve inside. "What are you hiding, Derek?" she demanded, her voice rough with emotion. Derek's eyes widened. "Are you out of your mind? You want to open a casket just because of a child's rambling? And what about the thudding?" Megan shot back. "I told you it's not just the wind," Derek roared. "Then let's open it and prove you're wrong." Liam interrupted, urging calm. The entire church held its breath as Derek's eyes remained fixed on the casket, like it was some monster. "No," he suddenly screamed, his voice cracking. "No one touches it." His outburst only made him seem more suspicious. George stepped in, his authoritative tone cutting through the tension. "Derek, if you keep resisting, it only makes you look guilty." Derek glared back, his lips pressed tight, sweat beading on his forehead. Then Bella let out another piercing scream. "Mommy, Daddy, I'm here." Her cry echoed, and the floor seemed to tremble with another series of thuds. Louder now, too loud to be a trick of the wind. Some villagers panicked and rushed for the door, while others stood frozen, their eyes wide with terror. Joan clutched her shawl, her voice shaking. "If something's wrong, we must check immediately." Mrs. Hudson took a deep breath and said slowly, "Call the priest. If there's a lost soul trapped, maybe he can help." The mention of the priest made Derek's face go pale. "No one is calling anyone," he barked. But Megan had had enough. "Liam, go get Father Gabriel right now," she commanded. Derek lunged to stop him, but George grabbed his shoulder firmly. "You have no right to interfere," George snapped. Derek struggled, his voice cold as he muttered, "Let me go." The entire church gasped at his aggression, but he continued, "You can't open it. It's disrespectful to the dead. Or are you scared of something?" Megan's words cut through him like a knife. He froze, and Megan shoved him aside, marching resolutely toward Ethan's casket. Liam and George stepped up beside her. "If Ethan is truly gone, we'll know for sure. But if he's not," George's voice was icy. Derek's face turned ashen. "No," he screamed, but no one listened. Megan placed her hands on the casket's lid as Bella whispered through tears, "Daddy." Taking a deep breath, Megan was about to lift the lid when suddenly Derek's hand lashed out, striking her hard across the face. A collective gasp swept through the church. Stumbling backward, her head spinning from the blow, Megan saw Liam surge forward, grabbing Derek by the collar. "What's wrong with you, Derek?" he roared. Derek struggled as Liam landed a brutal punch, sending him crashing to the floor. But Megan's focus was solely on the casket. The persistent thudding inside had not stopped. Thud, thud. Tears streamed down Bella's cheeks as she repeated, "Mommy, Daddy is knocking." Megan clenched her jaw, her chest tightening with overwhelming determination. She no longer cared about Derek's objections. She had to know the truth. The knocking grew louder, resonating throughout the church. There was something inside that casket. Her heart pounded like a war drum as she gripped the lid, pulled it open sharply, and declared with clear resolve. But just then, a voice screamed, "No." Derek lunged forward like a wild animal, his eyes bloodshot and his face twisted in terror. "No one opens the casket. Leave Ethan alone," he shrieked. Liam countered with another heavy punch that sent Derek sprawling on the cold stone floor. Despite the pain, Derek continued to scream, "Don't open it! Don't open it!" Megan, trembling with fury, demanded, "Why are you so scared, Derek?" "I'm not afraid," Derek screamed back, thrashing wildly. "You don't understand. Don't open it. Don't open it." But Megan had reached her limit. She turned to Liam and George, who nodded in silent agreement. With shaking hands but unwavering determination, she firmly grasped the casket lid. Bella sobbed, clinging to her mother, "Mommy, Daddy is scared." Just as Megan was about to lift the lid, a deep, authoritative voice boomed from the church entrance. Everyone turned as Father Gabriel arrived, his long black robes billowing slightly, his face solemn. "What is everyone doing?" Liam quickly stepped forward. "Father, something's wrong. There are noises coming from the casket. We need to open it." The priest slowly moved forward, his piercing eyes scanning the terrified crowd before resting on Megan. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. Megan's breath hitched. Beside her, Bella squeezed her hand tighter, her tearful eyes saying, "Daddy is scared." Those words pierced Megan's heart. After a shaky pause, she admitted, "I'm not sure, but I can't let Ethan be buried with doubts in my heart." Father Gabriel nodded gravely, then stepped toward the casket. The church fell deathly silent, and no one dared breathe. He gently touched the lid, and a heavy stillness filled the room. Then the thudding resumed, louder and more frantic. Mrs. Hudson screamed, and several villagers bolted for the door in terror. Derek, now on the ground, mumbled incoherently, "Don't open it, you'll regret this," but no one paid him any heed. Megan met Father Gabriel's steady gaze as he gave a slight nod. "Open it," he commanded. But before anyone could act, a man burst through the entrance, panting and disheveled as if he'd run miles. "Stop! "Don't open that casket," he shouted. It was Dr. Preston, the forensic expert. The entire church fell silent. Megan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Preston," she choked. He rushed forward, sweat dripping from his face. "There's been a mistake. I checked Ethan's death certificate. Doesn't add up." No one spoke. Liam's fists clenched. "What are you saying?" The doctor's face grew grim. "The certificate was signed by a doctor I don't recognize. I confirmed with the hospital. No one officially reported Ethan's death." The air in the church turned icy. Megan felt her body go numb. Derek whimpered, "No, no, no," as Liam thundered, "What does that mean?" Dr. Preston looked at Megan, his voice heavy as a gravestone. "It means there's a chance Ethan was never dead." The whole church erupted in screams. Megan collapsed to her knees, clutching Bella as the little one cried, "Mommy, I told you." Her trembling hands gripped Bella's dress as she reached for the casket lid. Just as she was about to lift it, Derek lunged forward again, screaming hysterically, and then the church doors slammed shut. Everything plunged into darkness. Terrified screams filled the air as villagers scrambled, pushing and shoving in a desperate bid to escape, though the heavy doors remained locked. The mingled sense of damp stone, burning candles, and panicked breathing created an almost unbearable atmosphere. Megan held Bella tightly, feeling the child shiver. "It's okay, baby. I'm here," she soothed in a soft whisper. Suddenly, from the darkness, someone yelled, "We can't stay here. We need to open the doors." A man pounded on the doors, but they wouldn't budge. "Who locked these doors?" someone demanded. Liam pulled out his phone, only to find there was no signal. Mrs. Hudson began trembling, muttering frantic prayers. "This is an omen, a punishment." Megan fought to stay calm, though she knew something was terribly wrong. "Please, someone open the doors," a woman cried out, but her plea was lost in the chaos. Then, a crazed, maniacal laughter echoed through the dark, and all eyes turned to see Derek standing in the middle of the church, sweat streaming down his face, his eyes wild with madness as he howled, "Don't open the casket! Don't open it!" His once commanding voice now barely held together with desperation. Father Gabriel stepped forward, his tone firm. "Derek, what do you know about this?" Derek staggered back, shaking his head violently. No, don't ask me." Liam stormed toward him, seizing him by the collar. "What did you do to Ethan?" he demanded. Derek broke down, his once controlling demeanor shattered as he crumpled to the floor, trembling. I didn't mean for it to go so far," he stammered. Megan's fists clenched, her voice razor-sharp. "What did you do, Derek?" Through shaky sobs, he confessed, "I just wanted what was mine. I wanted Ethan to sell the house, but he refused. He swore he'd never sell it. I tried to scare him. I slipped something into his drink, but he never woke up." The church was paralyzed with horror. Megan felt the world spin as a deafening ringing filled her ears. "You drugged my husband?" she cried. Derek nodded miserably. "I didn't know he was allergic." "Well, he didn't wake up." I panicked. "I even forged the death certificate. I bribed the doctor to fake it. I thought he was already gone." Megan's voice cracked with disbelief. "You didn't even check?" Derek, now cowed and unable to meet her gaze, whispered, "I was too scared. I let them bury him." He couldn't finish his sentence before a sudden, violent pounding from inside the casket filled the church with thunderous noise. Screams erupted as Derek's eyes bulged, his face drained of color. No, it can't be." Father Gabriel made the sign of the cross and commanded, "Open the casket." Megan took a deep breath, her hands shaking, knowing this was the moment that mattered most. She turned to Liam, nodding for him and George to help. A chilling wind swept through the church as Derek screamed in panic, "No, don't open it. Don't open it." But it was too late. Liam and George lifted the casket lid, and a heart-wrenching cry tore from Megan's throat. There, in the open casket, lay Ethan alive. Megan collapsed to her knees, tears blurring her vision. Ethan stirred. His body trembled, his skin ghostly pale, lips cracked from dehydration, and his eyes fluttered open weakly yet unmistakably. "Ethan!" Megan screamed, rushing to him, her hands shaking as she touched his face. I'm here. Bella burst into tears, sobbing, "Daddy, Daddy, I'm here." A faint breath escaped his lips. Shock and disbelief filled the church as it became clear. Ethan had not died. He'd been buried alive. The villagers recoiled in horror. Some wept, others gasped in disbelief. Liam tore off his coat and wrapped it around Ethan. "Quick, we need to get him help." Father Gabriel knelt beside him, gripping his hand with a calm urgency. "Someone fetch water." Joan dashed off toward the back of the church. Megan sobbed as tears fell onto Ethan's hand, pleading, "Don't leave me, Ethan. Please don't go." Bella clung to her father's arm, her tiny hands gripping tightly as she hiccuped through her sobs. Ethan's lips trembled as if he wanted to speak, but he was too weak. Then, amid the chaos, a shrill cry split the air. "No, this is a demon." Everyone turned to see Derek crawling across the floor, his face twisted in pure terror, shouting, "No, Ethan is dead. He must be dead." Liam's anger exploded as he lunged at Derek, delivering a crushing punch that sent him sprawling. "Shut up, Derek," he roared. Despite his protest, Derek continued to scream like a madman. Megan rose to her feet, eyes blazing with fury. "Why are you so scared, Derek?" she demanded. Derek, backing away, trembled. I didn't mean to." James, his voice rising, accused, "You buried him alive." The villagers gasped, their fear shifting to righteous anger. Mrs. Hudson clutched her rosary, tears streaming down her face as she murmured, "He's the devil, truly the devil." Joan hissed, "Call the police. This crime must be punished." Father Gabriel signaled to Liam, "We must get Ethan outside. He needs urgent care." Liam and several local men carefully lifted Ethan from the casket. Megan grasped her husband's hand, pleading, "Ethan, hold on. You have to live." Bella sniffled, patting her father's face. "Daddy, wake up. I miss you so much." Ethan exhaled a weak breath, his tear-filled eyes meeting Megan's as he realized everything had been heard, that he had nearly been buried alive, and that even his daughter had saved him. Outside, sirens wailed as police cars screeched to a stop, followed by an ambulance. Sheriff Martinez emerged, his eyes cold as he surveyed the trembling crowd. "What on earth is happening here?" he demanded. Liam rushed forward, shouting, "Derek tried to kill Ethan. He bribed the doctor, faked the death certificate, and had him buried alive." The church erupted in chaos. Sheriff Martinez turned to Derek, his face icy. "Arrest him immediately," he ordered, and two officers quickly restrained Derek, who cried out, "I'm innocent. I'm innocent," as he thrashed wildly. The officers tightened the cuffs and forced him to the floor. "You will pay for everything you've done," Liam growled. Sheriff Martinez then addressed Megan in a deep, firm voice. "We'll conduct a full investigation. Ethan will be taken to the hospital right away." Megan nodded through her tears as she turned back to Ethan, feeling his weak breaths against her skin. A glimmer of hope shone in his eyes. "You're going to live, Ethan. You're going to live," he murmured weakly. Bella smiled through her tears, wrapping her tiny hands around her father. "Daddy, can we go home?" Ethan's voice, though hoarse, was full of love. "Yes, let's go home, to St. Stephen's Hospital." 3 days later, in the early morning light filtering through the hospital window, Ethan's face glowed softly. His breathing had steadied, his cheeks no longer hollow, though his eyes still carried the weight of emotion as he looked at Megan and Bella by his bedside. Bella hopped onto the bed, wrapping her small arms around him and gently tracing his face to make sure he was real. "Daddy, you're back," she said. Ethan offered a weak smile, his eyes brimming with warmth. "I'm sorry, my love," he murmured, his rough voice heavy with emotion. Megan squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Do you have any idea how scared we were?" Ethan nodded slowly, sorrow etched on his face. "I heard everything," he said softly. "When I was trapped in that coffin, I couldn't move or scream. But I heard you, I heard Bella, and I heard Derek lying." Megan cried, wrapping her arms around him. Bella clung to his arm, her voice clear and bright. "But Mommy saved you. I heard you calling me Daddy." Ethan looked at his daughter, his eyes softening. "Thank you, my little angel," he said. Bella beamed and hugged him tightly. Outside the hospital room, Liam and Father Gabriel waited as Megan emerged. Liam informed her steadily, "Derek is in custody and he's going to trial." Megan nodded, though her heart still ached as Father Gabriel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What matters most is that Ethan is alive," he said gently. A week later, in a packed courtroom at Castleton Provincial Court, the villagers gathered to witness justice. Derek was led in, shackled and gaunt, his eyes filled with terror. The prosecutor read the charges: attempted murder, falsification of a death certificate, and the deliberate burial of a living man, each word slicing through the tense air. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but Megan focused only on one thing. Derek no longer exuded arrogance or power. He was now a trembling coward facing his fate. Just as the judge was about to deliver the sentence, a voice rang out. Ethan, leaning on a cane, but looking resolute, stepped forward and locked eyes with Derek. "I don't hate you," he said calmly, "but I despise you. You betrayed our family. You betrayed your own honor, and now you must face the consequences." Derek collapsed to his knees, sobbing pitifully, and the judge banged his gavel. "Henry Jimenez is hereby sentenced to 25 years in prison." Applause erupted, though Megan closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. At last, the nightmare was over. A month later, the Herrera home was bathed in golden sunlight. Ethan stood on the porch, looking out over the fields, his hand clasped firmly in Megan's. Bella ran across the yard, her laughter filling the air. "We're really home," Megan whispered. Ethan nodded, his eyes peaceful. Thank you both," he said as Megan rested her head on his shoulder, her heart finally at ease. Ethan squeezed her hand and whispered, "I will never leave you and Bella again." Bella ran up, throwing her arms around both of them. "We're a family now. Nothing can tear us apart," she declared. Megan smiled brightly, pressing a gentle kiss to her daughter's forehead. "That's right, my love. We'll always be together." The sun shone down, illuminating a new beginning, a story of truth, justice, and love that proves the truth can never remain hidden and that, in the end, justice will prevail. Megan and Bella never gave up, and because of their unwavering love, Ethan was saved and the villain was brought to justice. This tale reminds us that a mother's intuition and family love are the strongest forces in the world, while greed and deception always come with a price. Persistence and righteousness will always win in the end. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Your support means the world.